Lulun at the Frontier, number 4. In our camp, beyond the wastes, there is feasting everywhere. Even the barbarians celebrate our triumphal return. Drunk together, in our golden armor, we dance. Our drums thunder over rivers and mountains. So this is the fourth and last of Lulun's poems at the Frontier, included in this anthology, and also Lulun's last poem, I believe, in the whole collection. In line with the previous poems, this collection of 4 sketches of frontier life for soldiers during the Tang Dynasty, but because of the generality, this would have been applicable probably to also the life of soldiers in the previous 500 or even 1,000 years. So this last sketch again gives us a picture of one aspect of life in the frontier from a relatively optimistic, of a relatively positive perspective. So these 4 poems, as I said in the previous one, are rather disconnected beyond having this topic of frontier poetry. The first 2 mainly focused on a general, on an unnamed commander who was able and virtuous, not actually unnamed. The second poem implies that it was Li Guang. The third and the fourth poems, on the contrary, move a little bit away from the general and more into the army. So what's the topic of this last poem? Well, it's a banquet, it's a celebration. So what we have in this poem, described in a few lines, is just one big party that takes place in the camp, presumably after an important military victory that has been achieved by the Chinese army against the barbarians. So this is a quatrain. Quatrains are very brief, so there's not that much scope for describing or narrating anything. Most quatrains just tend to focus on an image, a strong image, or an emotion, or a visual image that they develop. And you could say that that is what happens in this poem. You have just this one big image, the banqueting, the rejoicing, the happiness of the Chinese soldiers in the frontier who have been successful in the battle and who celebrate it now with eating, drinking, music, and dancing. It has, it has this slightly Valhalla-like tone. Yeah, one might imagine this as also pretty appropriately extended to the world of those Vikings fighting, drinking, and carousing. So it's something like that. Before going to the 2 couplets, again, I will comment, as I did with the previous 3 poems, that it strikes me as an unusually positive portrait of life at the frontier, which is unusual in Chinese poetry. In this very same anthology, we've encountered poems that are slightly similar to this one, like there's an army banquet or some sort of dancing and entertainment at the army camp. But what generally happens in those poems is the poetic persona feels sad. The music, because it's barbarian music, makes the poet or the poetic persona of the soldier who is listening to such music and seeing the dances feel all the more alienated from his surroundings and far from his homeland where he wishes to be. But here we get nothing of that, it's just happy celebration and nothing else. Okay, let's take a look at the 2 couplets. First couplet. In our camp, beyond the wastes, there is feasting everywhere. Even the barbarians celebrate our triumphal return. So the first line really summarizes the whole poem. So we are in barbarian lands beyond the wastes, so in some encampment that has been established in the steppes of Central Asia. And in the camp, what is happening? There's no military preparations or worries or preoccupation. There's feasting everywhere, celebration. And this happiness and this celebratory mood is hyperbolically extended, saying that even the barbarians, even the enemies, are celebrating this triumphal return. This triumphal return, I imagine, from a military campaign against the barbarians. Another way of reading it, perhaps, could be that the army was away from this area and is coming into it again. And, the barbarians are not necessarily hostile. Anyway, whether the barbarians are not hostile or they are, but, maybe they just appreciate the martial prowess of the Chinese and give credit where credit's due, the poetic persona claims that in this banqueting, Chinese and foreigners, they both feel happy. They all join the celebratory mood. Second couplet. Drunk together, in our golden armor we dance. Our drums thunder over rivers and mountains. So, what takes place at the party? Lots of things, but the second couplet clearly establishes the most important ones, which are drinking alcohol until they're drunk, dancing, and playing music. Golden armor. So, imagine armor would be mostly iron with some padded cloth, perhaps. So maybe the golden armor that is being referenced is, maybe because it's shiny, metallic. Maybe golden because it's ornamental, because the army is not fearing an attack or in celebrating the party. The soldiers wear their best clothing. Or it's, it's just a poetic convention, of exalting in this atmosphere of happiness and celebration. This armor of the soldiers becomes, golden. So they drink, they dance in their armor, and music is being played, presumably by the soldiers or by musicians that might be had in the camp. And the visual image of the third line, which is, the golden armor shining and the soldiers dancing, is exchanged for an oral image in the last line. The sound of the drums thundering, echoing through the rivers and mountains of this strange land. Not only has the presence of the army being seen and is being felt with the celebration, the sounds of the celebration extend like thunder through all this foreign territory. So, pretty simple, pretty straightforward poem. I believe not much to say about it, except from what has already been said. So, Valhalla in the Chinese style.